Chapter 8. Martin Harris gets taken once. The story members of the LDS Church are told and the story that history actually records do not always align. Nowhere is this discrepancy more glaring than in the strange saga of the Anthon Transcript, a page of characters supposedly copied from golden plates, which Joseph Smith sent through Martin Harris to two college professors, Charles Anthon of Columbia College and Samuel Mitchell of Rutgers Medical College. The timeline itself contains contradictory reports. When did Joseph actually write these characters down? When did Harris make his journey to have them authenticated? The answers shift depending on who's telling the story. Joseph himself claimed, "I commenced copying the characters off the plates. I copied a considerable number of them, and by means of the Urim and Thummim, I translated some of them, which I did between the time I arrived at the house of my wife's father, in the month of December, and the February following." Joseph and Emma had arrived in Harmony in December 1827. Martin Harris followed in February 1828. According to Joseph's own account, he'd already produced Book of Mormon characters before Harris ever set foot in Pennsylvania. Book of Mormon Central confirms this, noting the transcript contains characters that are believed to have been taken from the Book of Mormon plates and shown to Mitchell and Anthon by Harris for their examination in the winter of 1828. By June 1828, Joseph and Martin had already translated 116 pages Harris would later lose in Palmyra after showing them to his wife and a select circle of others. Those same people whom Joseph claimed God had specifically authorized Harris to share them with. Only after Harris returned to Harmony did Joseph produce a revelation in which God supposedly rebuked both of them. It marked the last time Harris ever served as Joseph's scribe, though it was by no means the end of his involvement in the unfolding story. But here's the question that collapses the entire narrative. Why would God rebuke both Joseph and Martin for sharing the 116 pages when it was allegedly God himself who dictated exactly who could see them? Could it be that Smith was simply at his wit's end? Joseph and Martin had spent countless hours producing those 116 pages. Joseph was desperate for financial relief, while Harris had been bleeding money into the venture. The loss of the manuscript was devastating. Worse still, the timing coincided with Emma giving birth to a child who tragically lived less than a day. One can understand why Joseph was in such a fragile state, grieving his child's death while simultaneously facing the crushing blow of the manuscript's disappearance. By June 1828, Joseph even joined the Harmony Methodist Church, suggesting he was seeking solace and stability. In those days, ministers acted as counselors and physicians of the soul. Yet this decision poses one enormous problem. Joseph's supposed first vision, in which he claimed God and Jesus explicitly told him that none of the denominations were correct, that all were wrong, corrupt, and an abomination in God's sight, is known by heart to every Latter-day Saint today. So why, 8 years later, did Joseph join the very thing he had allegedly been commanded never to do? Emma's cousins, who had appeared as witnesses against Joseph in the Glass Looker trial, re-emerge here to shed light on this contradiction. While he, Smith, was in Harmony, PA, translating his book, he joined the Methodist Episcopal Church. He presented himself in a very serious and humble manner, and the minister, not suspecting evil, put his name on the class book, the absence of some of the official members, among whom was the undersigned, Joseph Lewis, who, when he learned what was done, took with him Joshua McCune and had a talk with Smith. They told him plainly that such a character as he was a disgrace to the church, that he could not be a member of the church unless he broke off his sins by repentance, made public confession, renounced his fraudulent and hypocritical practices, and gave some evidence that he intended to reform and conduct himself somewhat nearer like a Christian than he had done. They gave him his choice, to go before the class and publicly ask to have his name stricken from the class book or stand a disciplinary investigation. He chose the former and immediately withdrew his name. So his name as a member of the class was on the book only 3 days. It was the general opinion that his only object in joining the church was to bolster up his reputation and gain the sympathy and help of Christians, that is, putting on the cloak of religion to serve the devil in. Fair LDS offers this defense. However, the Lewis account of Joseph's 3-day membership leaves him neither the time nor the searching assessment required to become a member of the Methodists. This scenario simply does not match how Methodists admitted or expelled members. At best, he was probably regarded as on probation, or, in modern LDS parlance, an investigator. Notice that Fair does not deny Smith may have been on probation or considered an investigator. This admission confirms that Smith was at least attempting to join a church that he himself claimed God had forbidden him to join 8 years earlier. The issue remains glaring. Smith looked toward the Methodist faith largely because both his mother, Lucy Mack Smith, and his wife, Emma, were devoted Methodists. The Lewis brothers' account aligns with the membership roster of the Harmony congregation, which explicitly lists Joseph Smith, Jr. Linda K. Newell and Valine T. Avery confirm. Emma's uncle, Nathaniel Lewis, preached as a lay minister of the local Methodist Episcopal Church. His congregation met in the homes of the members for Sunday services. On Wednesdays, a regular circuit preacher visited Harmony. In the spring or summer of 1828, Joseph asked the circuit rider if his name could be included on the class roll of the church. Joseph presented himself in a very serious and humble manner, and the minister obliged him. Joseph and Heel Lewis already knew Smith from the 1826 trial. They were sons of Nathaniel Lewis, the traveling minister we encountered when introducing Emma Hale. Both brothers were concerned that Smith was attempting to poach members from the Methodist sect in Harmony, a concern clearly reflected in their statement. Considering Smith's earlier con of Josiah Stoll in South Bainbridge and his subsequent trial, is it any wonder they reacted this way? Newell and Avery provide additional context. His name, however, stayed on the roll for about 6 more months, either from oversight or because Emma's brother-in-law, Michael Morse, who taught the class, did not know of the confrontation. When Joseph did not seek full membership, Morse finally dropped his name. 3 independent sources corroborate Smith's engagement with the Methodist Church: the testimony of the Lewis brothers, Emma's brother-in-law Michael Morse, and the church roster itself. Taken together, this evidence makes it entirely reasonable to conclude that Smith was not following the divine commandment of God and Jesus to avoid joining any church whatsoever. The Anthon affair. Matters were about to worsen for both Smith and Harris for the remainder of 1828. According to Joseph, he lost his gift of translation when Harris misplaced the 116 pages, and he would not regain it for a season. By winter of that year, Harris, still desperate for validation of the Book of Mormon, even after giving Joseph $50 to move to Harmony and financially supporting the Smiths while living with them, set out to authenticate the page Joseph had written down a year earlier. Joseph Smith later claimed that Professor Charles Anthon of Columbia College stated that the translation was correct, more so than any he had before seen translated from the Egyptian. Harris then showed him those not yet translated, and said they were Egyptian, Chaldaic, Assyriac, and Arabic, and that they were true characters. Following this questionable endorsement, Harris requested a letter of authenticity, verifying that the characters were legitimate and would substantiate the Book of Mormon. Harris claimed Anthon obliged. Yet as he was leaving Anthon's office, Anthon allegedly asked how Joseph had obtained the plates. Harris replied it was through the Spirit. At this point, Anthon demanded the letter back. When Harris handed it over, Anthon allegedly tore it apart, declaring there was no such thing as spirits or angels. This encounter became pivotal. Harris's version became a major tool for early Mormon missionaries in the 1830s, who used Anthon's supposed endorsement as proof of the Book of Mormon's divine authenticity. Anthon soon discovered that his name and reputation were being publicly leveraged in support of the Mormon cause. Crucially, the account we have is not Harris's direct testimony but Joseph's retelling of what Harris supposedly told him, and this distinction is significant. Joseph's account of the Anthon incident appeared in 1838, a full decade after the alleged meeting. By contrast, Charles Anthon issued his own statement in 1834, 4 years before Joseph's version, and again in 1841. Notably, we never receive a direct statement from Martin Harris himself. In 1834, writing to E.D. Howe for his book Mormonism Unveiled, Anthon stated, "The whole story about my having pronounced the Mormonite inscription to be reformed Egyptian hieroglyphics is perfectly false. Some years ago, a plain and apparently simple-hearted farmer called upon me with a note from Dr. Mitchell of our city, now deceased, requesting me to decipher, if possible, a paper which the farmer would hand me, and which Dr. M. confessed he had been unable to understand. Upon examining the paper in question, I soon came to the conclusion that it was all a trick, perhaps a hoax. I will not reproduce the entire letter here, but it appears in the appendix. What is immediately clear is that Anthon's account diverges sharply from Joseph Smith's claim. Anthon's letter reads more as a warning to Harris. "Cut your losses," he said. The characters were merely a jumbled mix of letters from various languages, gibberish, with no coherent dialect. Now consider the defense mounted by LDS apologists. Book of Mormon Central states, "This document was created most likely sometime between the years 1829 1831 by John Whitmer, who was one of the 8 witnesses of the Book of Mormon, and who was called by revelation to be an early historian and recorder of the Church of Christ, Doctrine and Covenants 47. The transcript is filled with characters that are believed to have been taken from the Book of Mormon plates and shown to Mitchell and Anthon by Harris for their examination in the winter of 1828. The problem is glaring. The statement claims the document was created most likely sometime between the years 1829 1831 by John Whitmer. Yet Joseph Smith himself recounts writing the characters in December 1827, well before Martin Harris ever became involved. Why does Book of Mormon Central assert a creation date of 1829 1831, 2 to 4 years after Smith's own timeline? Harris's consultation with Mitchell and Anthon is placed in winter 1828, revealing significant chronological inconsistencies. Another problem lies in the hedging. Characters that are believed to have been taken from the Book of Mormon plates. Believed? Either these are the characters taken to Mitchell and Anthon, or they are not. The distinction is binary. Book of Mormon Central continues. While the document itself is not the original text examined by Mitchell and Anthon, it does appear to be an early copy of the now lost original prepared by Joseph Smith. At some point, the document fell into the possession of David Whitmer and has remained in the archives of the Community of Christ, formerly the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, in Independence, Missouri. Another complication. We are told that the document is not even the original, but a copy that somehow passed into David Whitmer's hands. The apologetic defense suggests that John Whitmer created this copy in his capacity as the church's first historian. But this line of reasoning creates further problems. If John Whitmer created the copy, does this not strip Joseph Smith of credit as the one who originally transcribed the characters? Do the apologists know something unspoken, that the Whitmers were involved with Smith far earlier than is usually acknowledged? Were the Whitmers already entwined in Smith's plot to deceive? Evidence we will soon examine strongly suggests this may be the case. Notice also that nowhere in this entire episode do we have a direct statement from Martin Harris himself on the matter of Charles Anthon. Instead, we are left with Anthon's rebuttals in 1834 and 1841, Joseph Smith's retrospective claim in 1838, and the document in the Whitmers' possession. Why is Harris so conspicuously silent? Could it be that he was humiliated at having been duped? That his wife Lucy was right in calling Joseph a fraud? Anthon explicitly states that he warned Harris of the deception. Did Harris prefer to keep his embarrassment hidden? The Isaiah problem. The LDS scholarly response to Anthon's denial is revealing. BYU's Robert F. Smith, Gordon C. Thomason, and John W. Welch argue. Caught on the horns of a dilemma, and having unwittingly fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah 29, Anthon took the easy way out. He tore up the statement he had innocently given to Harris and denied Harris's story. Today, Anthon's cover-up appears more blatant than ever. According to these scholars, Anthon's denial was not sincere but a deliberate cover-up, one that paradoxically fulfills prophecy. They specifically cite Isaiah 29, "For the Lord hath poured out upon you the spirit of deep sleep, and hath closed your eyes. The prophets and your rulers, the seers hath he covered. And the vision of all is become unto you as the words of a book that is sealed, which men deliver to one that is learned, saying, Read this, I pray thee. And he saith, I cannot, for it is sealed. This, I pray thee. And he saith, I am not learned. LDS interpretation casts Anthon as the learned man and Joseph Smith as the unlearned. Anthon had asked Harris to bring him the golden plates for direct examination, but Harris refused, stating that no one but Smith could see them. They were sealed and locked away. Martin then recounted that Anthon said he could not read a sealed book. Thus, LDS scholars argue, Anthon himself unwittingly fulfilled Isaiah 29:11, while Joseph Smith's supposed ability to translate the plates aligns with verse 12. At first glance, this may seem to lend weight to Smith's account. Yet just looking at these 3 verses without addressing the broader chapter's meaning, issues immediately arise. Verse 10 tells us that the prophets and seers had their eyes closed, their ability taken away. Smith himself was claiming to be both prophet and seer, and if he were indeed such, then according to this verse, he would not possess the gift of prophecy or the role of a seer. Verse 11 states, which men deliver to one that is learned. Martin Harris was only one man, no one else accompanied him. So where are the men? Now for the real kicker. Isaiah is mourning for the Jewish people and Jerusalem. The Assyrian army had conquered and subjected the Jews, leaving them humbled and lowered to the dirt. God promised deliverance, and they believed this promise was fulfilled when a plague wiped out the Assyrian army in a single night. The chapter describes a nation that honors me with lip service, but not sincerely in their hearts. They are acting out of rote. Therefore, I will take away sages, making my word more obscure, and much wisdom will be lost. Rabbi Eric Levy explains, the false prophets were blinded to the truth, and they blinded others to it. They were like drunks without even drinking a sip. God made them fall into a deep sleep, covering their eyes. To them, the words of true prophets are like somebody trying to read a closed book, or someone giving a book to a person who can't even read. Rabbi Levy continues, the deaf will hear the words of prophecy, and the blind will see through the darkness. This is a reversal of the obscuring of knowledge above. Those who previously suffered will rejoice in God. The tyrants are gone, and the evil people have been destroyed. The LDS Church does not emphasize the complete chapter. To do so would expose the Book of Mormon claims as ludicrous, since the chapter has nothing to do with a literal book at all, but rather with Israel being punished and God's promise of redemption. The closest the chapter comes to supporting LDS claims is its promise that prophets and seers would be restored. But that happened centuries before Smith appeared. Many prophets arose after Isaiah. The LDS Seminary Teacher's Manual, Lesson 122, reads, Isaiah prophesied of the great apostasy and the restoration of the gospel, including the coming forth of the Book of Mormon. He prophesied that the Book of Mormon would correct false doctrine and bring joy to those who read and live by its teachings. To the majority of mainstream Christianity, however, the sleep and closing of the eyes, referred to in Isaiah 29, means that the Jewish nation would reject Jesus as Messiah, that they would not see him when he came and would deny his role. Scholar Matthew Henry explains it this way. This is applied to the unbelieving Jews who rejected the gospel of Christ and were justly hardened in their infidelity till wrath came upon them to the uttermost. Rom 11:8. Joseph cherry-picked from Isaiah 29. He was very familiar with the passage, as we will later see when we explore the Book of Mormon itself. He took certain verses that could bolster his claims, knowing that Harris would not receive the confirmation he desired. Isaiah 29 verse 11-12 was the perfect scapegoat for Smith to use on a gullible and religious zealot like Martin Harris. The Anthon Transcript is already more than evident. Smith was caught attempting to use a scholar to validate his claims, only to have it backfire. His primary concern, however, was keeping Martin Harris as his financial backer, and it appears he succeeded. After all, the Book of Mormon went to print. Enter Oliver Cowdery. Meanwhile, in the fall of 1828, something else noteworthy was happening in Palmyra, New York. A 22-year-old schoolteacher named Oliver Cowdery arrived in town as the Manchester schoolmaster. He happened to tutor Joseph Smith Sr., and according to the LDS Church, it was customary for Cowdery to lodge with the Smith family. While staying with them, Joseph Sr. and others told him stories about the Book of Mormon and Joseph Jr.'s supposed abilities. LDS apologist Jeffrey G. Cannon describes the moment. His curiosity piqued. He had plied his landlord with questions, eager to learn more. At first, Joseph Sr. was reluctant to share, but he eventually gave way to his boarder's pleading and told him about Joseph Jr.'s experiences. Oliver needed to know if such wonderful things were true. He prayed. A peace came to him, convincing him that God had spoken and confirming the stories he had heard. Before continuing with the timeline, we must first examine who Oliver Cowdery was, since his role makes a significant difference in the Mormon claims regarding the Book of Mormon's origins. Oliver was born in Wells, Vermont in 1806 to William and Rebecca Cowdery. When he was only 3 years old, his family moved to Poultney, Vermont. His mother died on September 9, 1809. His father later remarried and had additional children with his new wife. Reports indicate that during this period, Oliver began using a divining rod to search for buried treasures. This may have been nothing more than a child at play, but it also mirrors practices attributed to the Smith family. What makes it more intriguing is that both the Smith and Cowdery families originated in Vermont, Sharon being not far from Wells or Poultney. Even more surprising is that Oliver and Joseph Jr. were actually third cousins once removed. Yes, they were related. Some reports even claim they were second cousins. During Oliver's time in Poultney, Vermont, a Calvinist New England Congregationalist minister named Anthon Smith, no relation to Joseph Smith's family, was preaching. He would later become significant in the story by 1830. The Cowderys, as Calvinists, attended Anthon Smith's congregation during the period when he wrote 2 fictional works, one of which would later play a critical role in connection with Joseph Jr. and the Golden Bible claims. On the Fair LDS website, regarding the hidden family connection, they state, "The accusation that Oliver, being a distant cousin of Joseph Smith, makes him an unreliable witness to the Book of Mormon is what is known as an ad hominem attack on the witness's character. I, along with others, fail to see how an ad hominem attack is being made against Oliver Cowdery. Whether one considers it significant or not, the fact remains, they were related." Fair LDS itself admits, "One can see that accusations that Oliver is an unreliable witness because he is related to Joseph Smith applies both of these definitions. Oliver was indeed a distant cousin of Joseph Smith, but they had never met before the Book of Mormon was translated." Those who put forth this criticism attempt to prejudice the reader by implying that this relationship made Oliver unreliable. The fact that they were distantly related has no bearing upon Oliver's reliability as a scribe or as a witness. How does this relationship make him an unreliable witness? What is the conflict of interest? Knowing Joseph Smith prior would not automatically make Oliver unreliable, nor would it disqualify him as a scribe. However, it does raise legitimate questions about honesty and the possibility of deceit. Why then are LDS members rarely taught about the family connection between the Smiths and the Cowderys? Joseph Smith emphasized that he and Oliver had no prior connection before April 1829, yet this claim is, at the very least, debatable. Not only were Oliver and Joseph third cousins, but their fathers were also part of the wood scrape movement of Vermont, which began in the 1790s and lasted into the 1820s. We are further informed, in 1799, with the wood movement gathering momentum, a man named Winchell, who contemporaries claimed was a fugitive and a counterfeiter, arrived on the scene and initiated the group into the use of the hazel rod, a small shrub cut with 2 prongs. From the use of this stick, Winchell and the Woods pretended to divine all sorts of things to suit their purpose. Middletown, Vermont historian Barnes Frisbee recounted, "There we find these men, Joseph Smith Sr. and William Cowdery, with the counterfeiter Winchell, searching for money over the hills and mountains with the hazel rod, and their sons Joe and Oliver, as soon as they were old enough, were in the same business, and continued in it until they brought out the vilest scheme that ever cursed the country." It is rather ironic that both Oliver's and Joseph Jr.'s fathers knew one another and were members of the same organization, the Wood Scrape. Equally ironic is that both Oliver and Joseph Jr. embraced divining tools. Oliver with his rod, Joseph with his stones. Following the trail deeper, in 1824, or possibly early 1825, Oliver Cowdery was working along the Pennsylvania Panhandle, which stretches from Pittsburgh up to St. Louis, Missouri. This detail is important because it provided him an opportunity to meet Sidney Rigdon, who would emerge as a pivotal figure in the years ahead. Oliver is also reported to have been in the Palmyra region in spring 1825, attending one of several religious revivals. Interestingly, Joseph Smith himself claimed to have attended these same revivals. Given their family relation, it is reasonable to wonder whether they encountered one another there, or even attended together. Though unproven, it is speculated that Sidney Rigdon may also have been in the area at the time. As a traveling minister, and with Ohio being no more than a 2-day journey away, it is entirely possible that Rigdon, Oliver, and Joseph crossed paths well before 1830. By August 1826, Oliver Cowdery had arrived in Leroy, New York, working at the Batavia Advocate printing office. This office was then printing William Morgan's book exposing Freemasonry. Cowdery is believed to have been one of the typesetters before the press was destroyed in an arson attack carried out by Masons shortly before Morgan's murder on September 19, 1826. This connection would also prove significant in Mormon history a few years later. Historians, both inside and outside the LDS Church, agree that Oliver and Joseph were related, even if not all agree whether they knew one another prior to 1829. Having established some background on Cowdery, we return to the developing timeline. The Church's account of Oliver Cowdery's meeting with the Smith family is not entirely forthright. The Manchester, Ontario County, NY School Board of Trustees needed a new schoolmaster. They first offered the position to Hunter Lyman Cowdery of Arcadia, NY. Lyman accepted, then declined, reportedly recommending his brother Oliver for the post. The trustees agreed and employed Oliver. Notably, Hiram Smith, Joseph Jr.'s elder brother, also sat on that board of trustees. Some suggest the Smith-Cowdery family connection played a role in securing Oliver the position. While direct proof is lacking, the evidence raises suspicion. This connection may also explain why Oliver stayed with the Smith family beyond merely tutoring Joseph Sr. After all, they were extended family. Oliver was living at the Smith home in Palmyra. He claimed to have prayed about the stories told by the Smith family and experienced a peaceful confirmation that God was calling him to be Joseph's scribe. When the school term ended in spring 1829, Oliver traveled to Harmony, Pennsylvania, where Joseph lived with his wife Emma, farming land owned by Emma's father, Isaac Hale. Here we must note a discrepancy. The LDS Church presents a different account, claiming Oliver encountered Joseph Sr. walking along a road near a fence. Joseph Sr. allegedly told Oliver all about his son's work in Harmony. Oliver then prayed in his room and soon traveled to join Joseph. Yet records indicate Oliver did not leave Palmyra until April 1829. If God had truly called him to serve as Joseph's scribe, why did he wait at least 3 months or more before traveling to Harmony? Before moving forward, we must introduce another key figure, David Whitmer. As mentioned, he would play a crucial role in the Smith timeline. In November 1828, Whitmer, a farmer from Fayette, NY, traveled to Palmyra on business. While the nature of this business remains uncertain, the visit itself is established. During this trip, Whitmer met Oliver Cowdery, who relayed the stories he had heard from the Smith family and revealed his plan to meet Joseph personally. During his stay with the Smiths in late 1828, Oliver also wrote several letters to Whitmer, sharing details of what he was learning from the Smith family. The stage was set, the players were assembling, and the greatest deception was yet to unfold.